My name is Lily. I'm 31 years old, and I'm about to tell you the story of how my family spent over $80,000 on my sister's education while calling my $2,000 trade school program a waste of money. What they didn't expect was that their golden child would end up struggling while their supposed disappointment became more successful than any of them ever imagined. If you've ever been the overlooked sibling, the one whose dreams were dismissed while someone else got endless support, this story is going to hit differently. I want you to think about the last time someone you loved made you feel small. Really, small. Like your dreams didn't matter, like your path wasn't worth investing in. Now, imagine that person was your entire family. And imagine they did it for years while pouring everything they had into someone else. That's where this story begins. But trust me, it's not where it ends. The pattern started early. I was maybe 8 years old when I first noticed that Jessica, my sister who's 3 years older, seemed to live by different rules. When she wanted piano lessons, our parents found the money immediately. When I asked for art supplies, suddenly the budget was tight. When Jessica struggled with math, they hired a tutor. When I struggled with reading, they told me to work harder. I learned not to ask for much, and I learned that Jessica's needs always came first. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. By high school, the disparity had become impossible to ignore. Jessica was the academic star, the one heading to college, the one with potential. I was more hands-on, more practical. I loved working with my hands, fixing things, creating things. While Jessica studied for her SATs, I was in our garage rebuilding the engine of an old motorcycle I'd bought with money from my part-time job. My parents would walk past me covered in grease, shake their heads, and ask when I was going to get serious about my future. When Jessica graduated high school, the celebration lasted for weeks. There were parties, gifts, and endless conversations about which prestigious university she'd attend. When I graduated 2 years later with decent grades and a clear plan for trade school, the response was markedly different. My parents seemed almost embarrassed when relatives asked about my plans. They'd mumble something about me figuring things out and quickly change the subject to Jessica's latest academic achievements. The real eye-opener came when Jessica started college. Our parents didn't just pay her tuition, which was substantial even for in-state costs. They bought her a car, furnished her dorm room, gave her a generous monthly allowance, and paid for study abroad programs. They celebrated every semester, like it was a major accomplishment, posting about her achievements on social media and bragging to anyone who would listen. The total investment over 4 years was close to $60,000. Then, Jessica decided her bachelor's degree in communications wasn't enough. She wanted to pursue a master's in marketing. Our parents didn't hesitate. Another $30,000 over 2 years, plus continued living expenses and the same level of support. When she graduated with her master's degree and struggled to find a job in her field, they funded a complete career change into graphic design, which meant another associate's degree program. $25,000 more dollars, plus continued support while she figured out her passion. Meanwhile, I had spent 2 years after high school working full-time at a local automotive shop, saving every penny I could. I loved the work, loved the problem-solving aspect of diagnosing car troubles, loved the satisfaction of fixing something that was broken. I'd found my passion early, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to become a certified automotive technician, specialize in hybrid and electric vehicles, and eventually open my own shop. The program I wanted to attend was offered at our local community college. It was intensive, hands-on, and would give me industry certifications that were in high demand. The entire program cost $2,000. $2,000 compared to the over $80,000 they'd spent on Jessica's education by that point. I had saved $1,500 on my own, so I needed $500 from my parents to cover the remaining costs. I remember the day I asked them. I had done my research, prepared a presentation about job prospects in automotive technology, shown them salary ranges and growth projections. The automotive industry was evolving rapidly with electric and hybrid vehicles, and technicians with specialized training were commanding impressive salaries. I explained that this wasn't just a job, it was a career path with real potential for growth and entrepreneurship. My father listened with the kind of patience you show a child who's explaining why they need a toy. When I finished, he exchanged a look with my mother that I'd seen countless times before. It was the look they shared when Jessica asked for something she wanted versus when I asked for something I needed. My mother spoke first, explaining that they'd already invested heavily in Jessica's education and money was tight. My father added that trade work was fine for some people, but they'd hoped I'd aspire to something more professional. The word stung. Professional. As if working with your hands, mastering complex mechanical systems, and providing essential services wasn't professional. As if the electricians, plumbers, and technicians who kept their world running weren't worthy of respect. They suggested I wait a year, save more money, and maybe reconsider a traditional college path. They could help with that, they said. If I wanted to follow Jessica's example and pursue a real degree, they'd find a way to support me. I left that conversation feeling smaller than I ever had before. Here was my family, people who claimed to love me unconditionally, telling me that my carefully researched, practical career plan wasn't worth a $500 investment. The same family that had spent thousands on Jessica's study abroad trip to France, where she mostly posted Instagram photos and complained about missing American food. But I didn't give up. I picked up extra shifts at the shop, worked weekends, doing oil changes and basic maintenance, and saved that final $500 myself. It took me 4 months, but I enrolled in the automotive technology program without their help. I remember filling out the paperwork alone, paying the fees with my own money, and feeling a mixture of pride and profound sadness. I was proud of my independence, but heartbroken that my family couldn't see my potential the way they saw Jessica's. The program was everything I'd hoped for and more. I excelled immediately, finishing at the top of my class and earning multiple industry certifications. My instructors recognized my aptitude and work ethic, recommending me for an internship at a high-end dealership that specialized in luxury and electric vehicles. While Jessica was struggling through her graphic design courses and changing her mind about her career path for the 3rd time, I was mastering cutting-edge automotive technology and building a reputation in the industry. My family's reaction to my success was telling. When I shared that I'd been offered a full-time position at the dealership with a starting salary that exceeded what Jessica was making with her master's degree, the response was muted congratulations, followed immediately by concerns about the physical demands of the work and questions about long-term career prospects. When Jessica landed a part-time graphic design gig that paid barely above minimum wage, they acted like she'd won the lottery. The turning point came during Jessica's graduation party for her 2nd degree, the graphic design program my parents had funded after her marketing master's proved unmarketable. The house was full of relatives and family friends, all celebrating Jessica's latest achievement. I had just finished my 1st year at the dealership and had been promoted to senior technician, a role that came with both increased responsibility and a significant pay raise. But nobody asked about my work, and when I mentioned my promotion, the conversation quickly shifted back to Jessica's artistic talents and bright future. That evening, I overheard a conversation that changed everything. I was in the kitchen getting drinks when my aunt asked my parents how both their daughters were doing. My mother's response hit me like a physical blow. She talked extensively about Jessica's education, her artistic vision, her potential for greatness. When my aunt asked about me, my mother paused before saying that I was doing fine, working at a garage, nothing too exciting to report. She actually said the words nothing too exciting to report about a career I loved, a job where I was excelling, and work that challenged me every day. My father added that they worried about my lack of ambition, that they'd hoped I'd eventually grow out of playing with cars and pursue something more substantial. Playing with cars. That's how he described my expertise in complex mechanical and electrical systems, my certifications in hybrid and electric vehicle technology, my growing reputation among customers and colleagues. Playing with cars. Standing there in that kitchen, listening to my parents dismiss my career and my achievements to make conversation about their concern for my lack of ambition, something fundamental shifted inside me. I realized that no amount of success in my chosen field would ever earn their respect because they had decided years ago that my path was lesser than Jessica's. They weren't disappointed in my choices, they were embarrassed by them. I started paying closer attention to family dynamics after that night. I noticed how conversations about the future always centered around Jessica's potential while treating my career as a phase I'd eventually outgrow. I noticed how my parents bragged about Jessica's creativity and intelligence while describing my mechanical skills as a useful hobby. I noticed how every family gathering included updates on Jessica's latest projects, while my achievements were glossed over or ignored entirely. The pattern became impossible to ignore when I bought my first house at 25, something I could afford because of my steady income and practical financial planning. My parents' reaction was concern about whether I was overextending myself financially, followed by questions about whether it was wise to tie myself down when I might want to pursue education later. When Jessica moved back home after her graphic design career stalled, they praised her for being smart enough to save money and figure out her next steps. I was building equity and establishing roots while she was living in their basement, but somehow her situation was more admirable than mine. I was supporting myself completely and building toward future goals while she was dependent on their continued financial support. But I was the one they worried about. The cognitive dissonance was staggering, but it was also clarifying. This wasn't about my choices or my success. This was about their inability to see value in anything that didn't fit their narrow definition of achievement. The final straw came during our father's 60th birthday party. I had just completed an advanced certification program in electric vehicle diagnostics, positioning myself at the forefront of a rapidly growing field. Tesla and other electric vehicle manufacturers were expanding their service networks, and technicians with my credentials were in incredibly high demand. I had also been approached by a former colleague about partnering in an independent shop specializing in hybrid and electric vehicle service, an opportunity that could double my income within 2 years. But when relatives asked about my life at the party, my parents deflected with vague comments about me staying busy with work. When those same relatives asked about Jessica, who had just started her 3rd career exploration in 5 years, my parents launched into detailed explanations of her artistic journey and her process of finding her true calling. They spoke about her like she was a brilliant artist taking time to develop her craft, while treating my specialized expertise like a blue-collar job I'd stumbled into. That night, my uncle approached me privately. He was an engineer who had always shown interest in my work, and he asked pointed questions about the electric vehicle industry and my role in it. As I explained the technical challenges, the rapid technological advancement, and the business opportunities, his eyes widened. He told me he had no idea my work was so sophisticated and that he was impressed by my expertise in such a cutting-edge field. His reaction crystallized something I'd been feeling for years. My family's dismissal of my career wasn't based on the reality of what I did or how successful I was becoming. It was based on their preconceptions about blue-collar work and their assumption that anything involving tools and uniforms was somehow less valuable than anything involving classrooms and degrees. They had never bothered to understand my work well enough to respect it. I made a decision that night. I stopped trying to earn their validation and started focusing entirely on building the career and life I wanted. I accepted the partnership opportunity with my colleague, and we opened our shop 6 months later. Our timing was perfect. The electric vehicle market was exploding, and qualified service providers were scarce. We were immediately busy, serving customers who were willing to pay premium prices for specialized expertise. Within 18 months, our shop was generating more revenue than we had projected for year 3. I was earning nearly triple what Jessica made in her various part-time positions, and I was building a business with real growth potential. I bought a larger house, started investing seriously, and began planning for long-term financial independence. But I stopped sharing these milestones with my family because I'd learned they would never celebrate them the way I deserved. The vindication I'd been unconsciously seeking came in the most unexpected way. A local business magazine was doing a feature on young entrepreneurs who were capitalizing on the green energy transition. They interviewed me about our shop, our specialization in electric vehicles, and our growth projections. The article was published with my photo on the cover and a headline about the next generation of automotive entrepreneurs. My phone started ringing immediately. Customers who had seen the article, industry contacts who wanted to discuss opportunities, and investors who were interested in the growing electric vehicle service market. But the call that surprised me most was from my mother. She had seen the article because a neighbor had brought it to her attention, asking if the Lily in the magazine was her daughter. For the first time in my adult life, my mother sounded genuinely impressed by my work. She asked questions about the business, about my plans for expansion, about the industry trends I'd mentioned in the article. She admitted she hadn't realized how sophisticated my work had become or how promising the field was for growth. She even said she was proud of what I'd accomplished, and sorry she hadn't understood it sooner. But her newfound interest felt hollow because it was based on external validation rather than genuine recognition of my efforts and expertise. She was proud now because a magazine had told her I was successful, not because she had taken the time to understand and appreciate my work over the years. Her pride was contingent on public recognition rather than rooted in knowledge of who I was and what I'd built. The real test came when Jessica's latest career pivot failed spectacularly. She'd spent 8 months training to be a yoga instructor, funded by our parents, only to discover that building a client base required business skills she didn't possess. She was back home again, struggling with direction and asking for continued support while she figured out her next step. Suddenly, my stable career and growing business looked pretty appealing to parents who were questioning their investment strategy. My father called to ask if I might have opportunities at my shop for someone with Jessica's creative background. He suggested she might benefit from learning business skills in a practical environment, and he wondered if I could mentor her toward a more stable career path. The irony was crushing. The same man who had described my work as playing with cars was now hoping I could provide career guidance for his favored daughter. I realized in that moment that their respect was conditional and their support was strategic. They dismissed my path when it seemed beneath their aspirations for their children, but they sought my help when their preferred approach failed to produce results. They wanted me to share my success with Jessica without ever acknowledging that my success existed or that it had value independent of its utility to them. I started setting boundaries for the first time in my adult life. I politely declined to hire Jessica, explaining that our business model required specialized technical training that would take years to develop. I stopped attending family gatherings where my achievements were ignored, while my sister's struggles were treated as noble artistic exploration. I limited my interactions with my parents to occasions when they showed genuine interest in my life, rather than just seeking my help with Jessica's problems. The shift in family dynamics was immediate and telling. My parents, who had always taken my presence and availability for granted, suddenly realized they had lost access to the daughter who had become successful despite their lack of support. They began reaching out more frequently, asking about my business and my life with what seemed like genuine interest. But I had learned to distinguish between authentic connection and transactional engagement. Through therapy, which I started, partly to process years of family disappointment, I began to understand that my worth had never been dependent on my family's recognition. I learned that their inability to see my value said more about their limitations than mine. I learned that seeking validation from people who had consistently failed to provide it was a form of self-harm that I could choose to stop. The therapist helped me recognize patterns I'd internalized from years of family favoritism. I had learned to minimize my achievements, to work twice as hard for half the recognition, and to accept dismissal as normal. I had learned that my needs were less important than others' wants, and that my success was less valuable than others' potential. Unlearning these patterns took time, but it was liberating in ways I hadn't expected. I also began connecting with other people who had experienced similar family dynamics. I found a community of individuals who had been overlooked, dismissed, or undervalued by their families, and who had built successful lives despite rather than because of family support. Sharing stories and strategies with people who understood the specific pain of family favoritism was healing in ways that surprised me. My business continued to grow, and I began receiving recognition within the automotive industry for innovation. In electric vehicle service protocols, I was invited to speak at conferences, consulted on industry publications, and recruited for leadership positions with larger companies. Each opportunity reinforced that my career choice had been not only valid, but visionary, positioning me at the forefront of an industry transformation. But the most meaningful validation came from my daily work. Every customer who trusted me with their vehicle, every complex problem I solved, every apprentice I trained represented proof that my skills had value. I was helping people maintain transportation they depended on, contributing to the adoption of cleaner technology, and building a business that provided good jobs for others. My work had impact and meaning that extended far beyond my family's narrow understanding of success. The turning point in my relationship with my parents came when my father's car broke down during a family crisis, and he needed immediate repair. Service. He called me not because he suddenly respected my expertise, but because he needed help, and I was convenient. I agreed to look at the car, diagnosed a complex electrical problem that other shops had missed, and fixed it efficiently. Only then did he seem to truly understand that my work required genuine skill and knowledge. That incident opened a conversation we should have had years earlier. I explained what my training had involved, what my daily work entailed, and what the future looked like for the automotive service industry. I showed him some of the advanced diagnostic equipment we used and explained how electric vehicles required completely different service approaches than traditional cars. For the first time, he listened without the patronizing patience he'd always shown when I talked about my work, but understanding my competence didn't automatically repair our relationship. Too much damage had been done by years of dismissal and favoritism for simple recognition to fix everything. I appreciated his newfound respect, but I needed more than acknowledgement of my skills. I needed acknowledgement of how his lack of support had affected me, and I needed evidence that he could value my achievements without external prompting. My mother struggled more with accepting that she had misjudged my potential and mistreated me in the process. She seemed to believe that her current pride in my success erased her previous dismissal of my goals. She would bring up the magazine article or mention my business growth to relatives, taking credit for raising a successful entrepreneur without acknowledging her years of discouragement and lack of support. I had to explicitly tell her that her pride felt hollow because it was based on outcomes she had never believed in, rather than recognition of the person I had always been. I explained that celebrating my success now, after years of dismissing my ambitions, felt more like taking credit than offering support. She struggled to understand why I couldn't just be happy that she was finally proud of me. Jessica's reaction to my success was perhaps the most complex part of the family dynamic shift. For years, she had been accustomed to being the accomplished sister, the one with potential, the one whose struggles were worth investment because her eventual success was assumed. Watching me build something successful in a field our parents had dismissed challenged her sense of identity within the family structure. She oscillated between resentment that I was succeeding in something she couldn't do and attempts to minimize my achievements by focusing on the physical demands of my work or questioning the long-term sustainability of the business. She seemed unable to genuinely celebrate my success because it highlighted her own struggles and the questionable return on investment of her expensive education. But there were moments when I saw glimpses of the sister I had grown up with before family favoritism had poisoned our relationship. She would ask genuine questions about my work or express authentic admiration for my independence. These moments gave me hope that we might eventually build a relationship based on who we actually were, rather than who our parents thought we should. I realized that healing my family relationships would require more than just my parents recognizing my success. It would require honest conversations about favoritism, acknowledgement of damage done, and fundamental changes in how we related to each other. Some family members were willing to do this work, and others weren't. I learned to invest my emotional energy accordingly. The boundary-setting process wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I stopped attending family events where my achievements were ignored or minimized. I stopped providing free labor or expertise to family members who had never valued my skills. I stopped seeking approval from people who had consistently failed to provide it. Instead, I focused on building relationships with people who appreciated me for who I was, rather than tolerating me despite my choices. My business partner became one of my closest friends, someone who understood my expertise and respected my judgment. My colleagues in the industry became a professional network that supported my growth and challenged me to improve. My customers became a source of daily validation that my work mattered and made a difference. I built a community of people who valued what I brought to the world. 3 years after opening our shop, we were approached by a regional chain that wanted to acquire our business model and expand it across multiple locations. The offer was substantial enough to provide financial independence and the opportunity to focus on industry innovation rather than daily operations. I accepted the offer, maintaining an ownership stake and a consulting role while gaining the world's freedom to pursue other interests. The financial success was gratifying, but the real victory was the recognition of my business model and expertise by industry professionals who understood the market we had captured. We had identified an emerging need, developed the skills to address it, and built a successful business around our specialization. Everything my parents had dismissed as playing with cars had evolved into a valuable enterprise that larger companies wanted to replicate. With financial security established, I began exploring ways to give back to the community and support other people who had been dismissed or undervalued. I started a scholarship program for students pursuing vocational training, focusing on young women entering traditionally male-dominated trades. I wanted to provide the kind of support and encouragement I had never received, helping others avoid the self-doubt and family conflict I had experienced. I also began speaking at high schools and community colleges about career paths in skilled trades, emphasizing the earning potential, job security, and intellectual challenges these fields offered. I wanted to counter the narrative that college was the only path to success and help young people understand that skilled trades could provide fulfilling, lucrative careers for people with the right aptitudes and interests. My family's reaction to my expanding success and community involvement was mixed. My parents seemed proud when they could brag about my achievements to their friends, but they struggled with the implications of my success for their own judgment and parenting choices. They had invested heavily in Jessica's education while dismissing mine, and my outcomes raised uncomfortable questions about their decision-making and values. Jessica remained the most complicated relationship. She seemed genuinely happy for my success sometimes, but other times she appeared resentful or confused about how things had turned out differently than anyone had expected. She was still searching for career direction while I had found mine early and built something substantial around it. The role reversal challenged assumptions about intelligence, potential, and worth that had shaped our family dynamic for decades. My father eventually apologized for not supporting my career choice and acknowledged that he had been wrong about the potential in skilled trades. The apology meant something to me, though it came years after I'd stopped needing his validation. It was progress, but it didn't erase the years of dismissal and doubt I had experienced during the formative stages of my career development. My mother found it harder to acknowledge her mistakes, perhaps because she had been more vocal in her dismissal of my choices and more effusive in her praise of Jessica's potential. She seemed to prefer celebrating my current success without examining her previous lack of support. This approach felt incomplete to me, but I learned to accept that some people couldn't engage in the level of self-reflection that true reconciliation would require. The most important change was my own relationship with success and validation. I no longer needed my family's approval to feel confident in my choices or proud of my achievements. I had built a life and career that satisfied me, surrounded myself with people who appreciated my contributions, and developed the financial independence to make choices based on my own values rather than others' expectations. I learned that seeking validation from people who had consistently failed to provide, it was a form of emotional self-harm that I could choose to stop. I learned that my worth wasn't determined by my family's recognition or anyone else's approval. I learned that the most important validation comes from within, from knowing that you're living according to your values and contributing something meaningful to the world. Looking back, I can see that my family's lack of support, while painful, ultimately strengthened my resolve and self-reliance. I learned to trust my own judgment, work harder than others expected, and persist through doubt and discouragement. These skills serve me well in business and in life, helping me build something successful despite rather than because of my family's expectations. The experience also taught me about the different forms that intelligence and potential can take. My sister's academic intelligence was real and valuable, but so was my mechanical intelligence and business sense. My parents' narrow definition of success had blinded them to other forms of achievement, limiting their ability to appreciate and support their children's diverse talents and interests. I've come to understand that family favoritism often says more about parents' insecurities and limitations than about their children's worth or potential. My parents' investment in Jessica's education wasn't really about her abilities. It was about their own social status and conventional definitions of success. Their dismissal of my career wasn't about my potential. it was about their inability to see value outside traditional academic achievement. This understanding helped me develop compassion for my parents while maintaining healthy boundaries with them. They had done their best with their limited understanding, but their limitations didn't obligate me to accept less support and recognition than I deserved. I could acknowledge their humanity while protecting my own emotional well-being. Today, my relationship with my family is cordial but boundaried. I maintain contact and participate in family events when doing so doesn't compromise my emotional health. I've learned to share my achievements selectively with people who can genuinely celebrate them rather than those who will minimize them or take credit for them. I've learned that not everyone deserves access to your victories, especially those who weren't present for your struggles. I want to end by speaking directly to anyone who has experienced similar family dynamics. If your family has dismissed your dreams, minimized your achievements, or invested more heavily in someone else's potential while ignoring yours, please know that their judgment doesn't define your worth or determine your future. Your value isn't contingent on their recognition, and your success doesn't require their validation. Trust your instincts about your own abilities and interests. Pursue the path that feels right to you, even if others don't understand or support it. Build relationships with people who appreciate what you bring to the world, and don't waste emotional energy seeking approval from those who have consistently failed to provide it. Your worth is inherent, not earned, and you deserve support and encouragement regardless of whether your dreams fit others' expectations. Remember that success takes many forms, and conventional markers of achievement don't capture the full spectrum of human contribution and accomplishment. The world needs skilled tradespeople, entrepreneurs, artists, and innovators just as much as it needs doctors, lawyers, and academics. There's no single path to a meaningful, successful life, and anyone who tells you otherwise is limited by their own narrow understanding of human potential. If you've experienced family favoritism or dismissal, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. How did you handle the lack of support? What kept you motivated when others didn't believe in your potential? How did you build confidence despite family doubt? Let's create a community of people who understand that our worth isn't determined by others' recognition, and that we can succeed despite rather than because of family support. And if my story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to this channel. Sharing these experiences helps all of us feel less alone in our struggles and more confident in our ability to create the lives we want despite the obstacles we face. Your dreams matter, your potential is real, and your success is possible regardless of who believes in you along the way.